My mom texted me at 2 a.m., grab your brother and run, don't trust your mother. So I did. I read it twice before I moved, then a third time, because the first two times my brain refused to accept it as a real sentence a real person could type. It sat there glowing on my ceiling like it had been burned into the plaster. Mom was supposed to be in Ohio for a work conference. She'd texted me a photo of her hotel room 2 nights ago, the ugly floral bedspread, the caption, "Send help, this decor is a crime." That was Tuesday. This was Friday, 2:04 a.m., and her flight home wasn't until Sunday, but her bedroom light was on. I could see the thin gold line of it under my door when I got up to check, the same way I used to check when I was 7 and thought there were footsteps in the attic. 14 years old, and I still did that stupid thing where I stood very still and listened with my whole body. The house didn't sound wrong. That was the part that scared me most. No creaking floorboards, no muffled arguing, nothing you'd expect from a horror movie, just the hum of the fridge downstairs and my own heartbeat doing something violent in my ears. I read the text a fourth time. Grab your brother and run. Don't trust your mother. If it wasn't her, who else would text me those exact words, in her exact way of texting, with her exact habit of never using contractions in anything important? And if it was her, then she was warning me about herself, which didn't make any kind of sense a 14-year-old could untangle at 2 in the morning with his hands shaking. I want to tell you I was brave. I wasn't. I was terrified in the specific private way you're only terrified when you're a kid and every adult in your life has just become a question mark. But there's a difference between terrified and frozen, and something in me, some animal, older than me part, got my legs moving before my brain finished catching up. I went to my brother's room first. Eli is 9. He sleeps like the dead, starfished across his bed with one sock on, and I had to shake him twice before his eyes opened, confused and instantly annoyed the way little brothers get when you wake them up for anything less than a fire. "What?" he mumbled. I put my hand over his mouth before the word finished coming out, and I felt his whole body go stiff under my palm. "Don't talk," I whispered. "Don't ask me anything yet. We have to go out your window right now." His eyes went huge and wet and scared in the dark, and I hated myself a little for putting that look on his face, but I hated the alternative more. Whatever the alternative was, I still didn't know. We went out his window onto the porch roof, down the trellis Mom always said was going to collapse one of these days, across Mrs. Henderson's yard where her dog barked once, sharp and short, before deciding we weren't worth the effort. My hands were bleeding a little from the trellis. I didn't notice until later. We stopped 2 streets over, behind the bus shelter on Denny, both of us breathing hard, Eli in his pajama pants and one sock, me in the t-shirt I'd fallen asleep in. My phone said 2:17 a.m., 13 minutes since the text. It felt like it had taken both nothing and forever. "Where's Mom?" Eli said. Not a question, really. More like a demand for the world to make sense again. "I don't know," I said, which was true in every way that mattered. I called her. She picked up on the first ring, which should have told me something right there, because Mom sleeps like she's being paid to do it. You have to call twice, sometimes 3 times before she surfaces. One ring, like she was waiting with the phone already in her hand. "Baby, where are you?" Her voice came through soft, a little groggy at the edges, pitched exactly right, the cadence exactly hers. "I got home early. I wanted to surprise you boys before the weekend." Every word fit. That's what still gets me when I think about it now. Every single word was something she could have said, would have said, has said before in some other context. It's not like the movies where the imposter gets the details wrong. This was worse. This was 98% right, and the 2% that was wrong was so small I almost let it go. She called me baby. Mom doesn't call me baby. She calls me turtle because I was 3 weeks late being born, and she says I've been taking my time about everything ever since. She has called me turtle since before I have any memories of not being called it. It's stitched into every goodnight, every school drop-off, every voicemail she's ever left me. So I said it back to her, quiet, like a password. "Turtle," I said, not a greeting, a test. There was a silence on the line that lasted maybe 4 seconds, but 4 seconds of silence on a phone call at 2 a.m. is an entire geological era. I could hear her breathing. I could hear, faintly, what sounded like the porch door. Then her voice came back, and it wasn't groggy soft anymore. It had gone flat and strange, like someone reading from a script they'd only half memorized. "Run," she said, barely a whisper now. I can't hold her back much longer. I didn't understand it. I want to be honest and say I still don't fully understand it. Not the way you understand a math problem, only the way you understand a bruise, by the shape of the hurt it leaves. But something in my chest went cold and small because whatever was happening, it wasn't a stranger wearing my mother's voice like a costume. It was something that used to be just her. Here's what I didn't know that night, what I only pieced together over the months after. Sitting in waiting rooms that smelled like hand sanitizer and old carpet, listening to a therapist named Dr. Okafor explain things slowly, like she was diffusing something. 6 months before that text, my dad died. Heart attack, fast, no warning, the kind of death that doesn't give you time to prepare a single sentence of goodbye. Mom found him in the garage. She was the one who called 911, the one who did compressions until the paramedics got there, the one who rode in the ambulance holding his hand even after the paramedic gently told her she could let go. She didn't cry at the funeral. Not once. I remember standing next to her in the too big black dress she'd bought 2 days before, and I remember thinking she looked like a photograph of herself, technically accurate and completely empty. Something cracked in her that week. I didn't see it happen. Nobody sees these things happen. Not really. You only see the after, the strange gaps, the mornings she didn't remember driving home from somewhere, the therapy appointments she wouldn't explain, the way she'd sometimes call me by my full name, Nathaniel, in a tone that made the hair on my arms stand up, because she has never once in my whole life called me Nathaniel unless I was in real trouble. I thought it was grief. I told myself it was grief, because grief was a word I understood and this other thing didn't have a name I knew yet. But that night, crouched behind a bus shelter with my little brother shivering against my side, none of that history had reached me yet. All I had was a voice on the phone telling me to run from itself. "We're not coming home," I said. My own voice surprised me, how steady it sounded when nothing else in me felt steady. "Please," the voice said, and it cracked, and for one terrible second it sounded exactly like her again. The real her. The one who used to sing off-key in the kitchen and burn toast on purpose because Eli liked it that way. "Please, Turtle, I'm scared. I don't know how long I have." "Then tell me what's happening," I said. Silence. Then, so quiet I almost missed it under the sound of a car passing. "Ask Aunt Raina. She knows. She's known since March." The line went dead. I stood there in the orange wash of the bus shelter light with my brother's hand locked around my wrist, so tight it left marks. And I did the only thing that made sense. I called Aunt Raina. She answered on the second ring, and she didn't sound surprised. That's the part I couldn't get past for a long time afterward. She didn't sound surprised at all, just tired. The specific tired of someone who has been waiting for a phone call they hoped would never come. "Where are you?" she said. Not a question either, just like Eli's had been. "Tell me exactly where you are and don't move." She was there in 19 minutes, still in the sweatpants she must have slept in, hair pulled back messy, driving too fast for our quiet street. She didn't ask us a single question in the car. She just kept glancing in the rearview mirror at us like she was checking we were still real. At her apartment, after Eli finally fell asleep on her couch with a blanket that smelled like fabric softener and something safer than our house, Aunt Raina sat across from me at her kitchen table and told me the parts of the story Mom hadn't been able to tell herself. Mom had been diagnosed in March. Dissociative identity disorder, the kind that gets whispered about and misunderstood in every movie that's ever touched it, the kind that isn't about evil twins or demons, but about a mind that fractured a long time ago. Childhood, Aunt Raina said carefully, something that happened long before either of us was born, and had been holding itself together with sheer willpower until Dad's death knocked one of the last supports out. There was another part of her. Aunt Raina didn't like the word alter, said it made it sound like a costume change, but that's the closest word I have. Something that had been quiet Mom's whole adult life, something that came forward under enough stress, enough grief, enough sleepless 2 a.m. static, and did things Mom had no memory of afterward. Drove places. Said things. Once, months earlier, packed a bag like she was leaving town and then unpacked it the next morning with no memory of either. The texts, both of them, had come from the same phone, the same fingers, 2 different people wearing one exhausted body. "She's been terrified of hurting you boys," Aunt Raina said. "Not physically. She'd never—" And she stopped there, because even she wasn't sure enough to finish that sentence with total confidence, and I loved her a little for not lying to me. "She's terrified of confusing you, of you not knowing which version of her you're talking to. Tonight, I think the part of her that's still fighting got one message out before she lost the wheel again." I sat with that for a long time. Long enough that the sky outside Aunt Raina's kitchen window went from black to that bruised early blue that comes before real morning. We didn't go home that night. We almost didn't go home at all. Around 4 a.m., while Eli slept curled up like a comma on Aunt Raina's couch, headlights swept across her living room wall. Aunt Raina went stiff at the kitchen table, mid-sentence, and held up one finger for me to stay quiet. She crossed to the window and looked out through the gap in the blinds for a long, long moment. "It's her car," she said, very quietly. "Stay back from the door." I remember the specific animal fear of that, knowing the car, knowing the woman who'd get out of it would have my mother's face, my mother's slightly crooked front tooth, the little scar above her eyebrow from a bike accident in 1998 that she still tells the story of every single summer. Knowing all of that and still not knowing, for 4 unbearable minutes, who would be standing on the other side of the door when it opened. She didn't get out of the car. Aunt Raina watched from the window as the headlights just sat there, engine idling, for what felt like forever and was probably closer to 10 minutes. Then, without warning, the car reversed hard out of the driveway, tires chirping against the curb, and disappeared down the street going the wrong way for anywhere Mom would normally go. Aunt Raina called the facility intake line the second the taillights were gone. Called Mom's psychiatrist's after-hours number next. I sat on the floor with my back against the couch, close enough to feel Eli's slow breathing against my shoulder, and I didn't cry, not then. I just stared at the door like it might still open, like staring hard enough could control what came through it. Nobody came. We found out 2 days later, from Aunt Raina, in a voice she was trying very hard to keep level, that Mom had been picked up by police walking along the shoulder of the interstate on-ramp, barefoot, no memory of getting there at all. That's when the word inpatient stopped being something in a pamphlet and became something real, something with a building attached to it and a visiting schedule and a security desk where you signed your name in a binder. I think about that idling car more than almost anything else from that whole year. Not because it was the scariest moment, the bus shelter still wins that, honestly, but because of how long it sat there. Like some part of her, whichever part was driving, was trying to decide something, trying to fight its way back to the surface long enough to either walk up that driveway or drive away from it forever. It drove away. I've never been more grateful for a taillight in my life. Aunt Raina took Eli and me in for 2 weeks while Mom went into a facility upstate, the kind with a name that sounds like a college and a phone policy that only let her call on Sundays. The first Sunday, I almost didn't pick up. My thumb hovered over the red button for 3 full rings. I picked up on the 4th. "Turtle," she said, and I knew immediately the way you know your own name in a crowded room that it was her, really her. Her voice had that particular cracked open sound people get after they've cried somewhere private and aren't hiding it anymore. "I am so sorry. I don't remember sending that text. I don't remember most of that night. They told me what I said and I keep trying to imagine it and I can't, and I hate that I can't because you and your brother had to be brave enough for both of us. I didn't say it's okay because it wasn't, not yet, and I'd promised myself in Aunt Raina's kitchen that I wasn't going to lie to make anyone more comfortable anymore, not even her. I climbed out Eli's window, I told her instead. My hands got cut up on the trellis. You always said that thing was going to hurt somebody. She laughed, and it broke halfway into a sob, and then she laughed again anyway. I did always say that. Eli didn't talk about that night for almost a month. Then, out of nowhere, over cereal on a random Tuesday, he asked me if Mom had been the good one or the scary one when she called us baby instead of turtle and pancakes. And I realized he'd been quietly building his own private map of the whole thing this entire time, sorting every memory of her into 2 columns without telling anyone. I didn't know how to answer that in a way a 9-year-old should have to hear, so I just told him the truth, which is that I don't think it's that simple, that I don't think there's a good one and a scary one, so much as one tired, hurting person who never asked for any of this. He thought about that for a second, chewing, and then said, "Okay," and went back to his cereal, like that settled it. Kids are better at some things than we are. Our first visit to the facility upstate, 6 weeks in, I almost didn't go through with it. I sat in Aunt Raina's car in the parking lot with my hand on the door handle for almost 5 full minutes, running through every version of what might walk into that visiting room. When they finally brought her out, she was wearing a cardigan I didn't recognize, hair pulled back plain, no makeup, and for one horrible second my whole body locked up, ready to run again. Then she smiled at me, small and a little embarrassed, like she wasn't sure she'd earned the right to smile yet, and said, "Hi, Turtle," and something in my chest that had been clenched for 6 weeks finally let go all at once, so hard it actually hurt, like a muscle cramp releasing. She told me things that day I hadn't known and wasn't sure I wanted to know yet, that the fracture in her had roots going back to her own childhood, to a house she almost never talked about, to a version of being a kid that she'd spent 30 years making sure Eli and I never had to understand firsthand. "I built you two a normal life out of spare parts," she said, staring at her hands on the table between us. "I didn't know the parts would eventually run out. I didn't have anything smart to say to that. I just reached across the table and held her hand, the way she used to hold mine crossing parking lots when I was small enough to need it, and for a minute neither of us said anything at all. And that was somehow exactly the right amount of talking. It's been 11 months now. Mom is home. There's a plan, a real one, with a name for it and appointments on the fridge calendar in her handwriting. A code word Eli picked out himself that she's supposed to text me if she ever feels the ground start to slide again. The code word is pancakes, because Eli said nothing bad could happen on a night somebody was thinking about pancakes, and none of us had the heart to tell him that logic doesn't quite hold. And also, none of us really wanted to. She still texts me sometimes at 2 a.m. Not often. Maybe once a month when sleep won't come and the house gets too quiet, and the version of her that survives on vigilance needs to check that everyone's still exactly where they're supposed to be. "Good night, Turtle," the texts say now. Still in here, still me. And every single time, I text back the same 3 words, because I've learned that some sentences are worth saying again and again until they stop needing to be a question. I know. Go sleep.